I'm thrilled to welcome our next speaker, climate justice activist and co-founder of the Re-Earth initiative, Xiye Bastida. Welcome, Xiye. It's awesome to have you here. You're one of the most powerful voices, reminding us that the climate crisis is deeply intertwined with historical injustices. Having an Indigenous and global South point of view in this topic, how do you see the root causes of the crisis differently from the mainstream narrative?
Thank you so much, and hi everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you for just opening up your minds and your brains and your energy for imagination. I am very pleased to hear the former panelists because often when, as a young person, I talk about imagination, I often get the feeling that people think we're being unrealistic or there's this naivety tied to it. So I choose to come and say that imagining vivid futures that are positive is really hard, and it actually makes us a bit uncomfortable because of how hard it is. So thank you. And just to answer your question about systems and the roots of the climate crisis, I think we are all on the same page that carbon emissions are the main root of the climate crisis, but that's kind of what we have allowed the scope to be. Sometimes we go and say fossil fuels and coal, oil, gas, and we are fighting in the United Nations to get this language inside of the texts. As many of you might know, the Paris Agreement didn't even include oil, gas, and coal in the decision text. So at the official levels, there is no consensus on even where the crisis is. And we know that that's just the surface, because the true roots of the climate crisis are colonialism, the idea of going to a different place and taking over and extracting and saying that land is mine and I don't care about the people who live there. Now it's reflected in neoliberalism, and we can talk about all the isms that there are and how these are the real roots of injustice and what we see today. But I want to illustrate to you what it really looks like on the ground, because it's really easy to say these things and not know what they look like. About 2 months ago, I was in Ecuador, in the Ecuadorian Amazon, and I went to see the gold mining in Ecuador. If you're familiar with gold mining in Ecuador, there is actually a lot of legal gold mining. What it means is the government gives a huge concession, and they say it's legal for companies to mine here. But actually, each site is illegal because it's cheaper for them to not get the permits, to not do the environmental assessments, to not talk to the communities, to not pay the communities well. So they have like a bubble of protection of legality, but on the ground itself, it's all illegal. Gold mining in Ecuador produces in the Napa region anywhere from $1.5 million to the later estimates of $8 million every day. And each gold mining worker is paid around $30 to $40 a day. So we see that these resources are not staying in the community. They're damaging ecosystems, they're polluting the rivers. And most importantly, the companies that own these operations are definitely not local. They're in Canada, they're in China, they're in other places across the world. What broke my heart was not knowing all these facts, was being in the Napa River and seeing kids bathing in that water. It's seeing the kids who are joyous, who are having fun, who are jumping in and out of the water, and they don't know that their patrimonies are, is that a word in English? Patrimonio? That's what breaks my heart, that they don't know what it was, what it once was, what they have the right to live, to experience, and that explaining neoliberalism to a kid is not going to make sense to them, but what makes sense is what makes me happy, what is my culture, what do I have a right to. So, and I think illustrating it is one of the most powerful things we can do, because if not, we're just talking to people who know our same language, and one of the main things that we do in activism is be translators. Translators of what happens in the negotiations to the ground and vice versa. So we have to get really good at telling vivid stories, not just because we pay more attention to them as humans, but because we are then addressing an issue of just understanding and accessibility. So I hope more of these stories are highlighted so that we really see what the roots of the climate crisis are causing today, which is a new type of colonialism.
You already mentioned narratives now, and when you talk in your youth movements, you don't just advocate for change, but you say you embody it. So what do you think the world can learn from the ways young activists are building these alternatives and alternative narratives?
At the beginning of the youth movement, when I joined about 5 years ago, we had this really big narrative around adults stealing our future and companies selling out our future. And even though a lot of those things might be true, we realized that that didn't make people want to join the movement because we were against a lot of things. We were not for things. So now we have a really clear agreement that we will criticize the things that are wrong, but we will ask people to do things for the positive. Will you join us in making the city greener? Will you join us in making the city more walkable? Will you join us in protecting the Amazon rainforest? And when you frame things positively, I think just people want to be part of it, out for the right reasons, not just for the immediate rage and fear that you might get from learning about the climate crisis. So that's been one of the main tactics. Another one has been that I joined Fridays for Future when I was living in New York, and all of the other Fridays for Future activists were in Europe, and they were mobilizing tens of thousands of kids. But all my friends in Mexico didn't feel welcomed into those strikes. My friends from Malaysia said, I cannot strike because striking is illegal for me. So half of the world, if not more, because 87% of people under 30 live in the global south. So let's say about almost 90% of global youth felt that the climate movement didn't reflect them, or that they didn't feel like they could be part of it. So I set out to start an organization called Re-Earth Initiative that has its main values on accessibility and inclusivity for youth in the global south. Because these spaces of activism were not built for us, and we couldn't have the impact that we wanted to have because we were scared of joining the same types of activism. So now we translate everything to 5 languages. We have distributed about $290,000 in grants for youth in the global south, and we're permanently broke. We don't have money because we just keep giving it away. Because one of the main things that we embody is this sentiment that we're not regranting, we're redistributing any wealth that we have to others. And that is a new way of living in the world that we have not been necessarily taught. We don't know if that's the right thing to do. We don't know if it's sustainable, and probably it isn't. But what I know is that my activism kicked off because somebody believed in me, and the next person did, and the next person did. And I want to be part of that trail of believing in each other for the youth climate movement in the global south. So even if they get 1 grant from us because we don't get funding the next year, it doesn't matter, because they got somebody who believed in them. That is what I'm holding on to, the fact that we just need to believe in each other. I am where I am because my mom told me, you can do anything you want with your life. And I said, you know what? Yeah, I can. So that we need to say that to each other. And we are really embodying this sentiment that if you win, I win. And if I have an opportunity that I got this year, you can get it next year. And that is not how the environmental movement has behaved, because they're fighting for dollars and etc. We want to disrupt that. And I think that's what makes us different, makes us special, and should make us really participate in every room to reimagine how we're presenting the climate movement to be. And the last thing I'll say about this, because the first session really got me thinking, was that imagination and ideas really come out of boredom. You get the best ideas and the best, greatest illustrative imagination when you're bored. And if you were a kid playing with dolls and your shoes were cars, that is where, the type of boredom I'm talking about, where it just pushes you to think a bit farther. And in the attention economy that we have today, where every second that we are bored, we just look at our phones and scroll, and our attention spans are declining rapidly, and you see little kids with iPads everywhere. What we're taking away is actually little kids' ability to imagine. And we are the ones who have lived both worlds. A lot of technology, not a lot of technology. So we need to protect that. I think imagination should be a human right. I don't know how that actually works, but that is the type of ideas that we need to start having, because we're not going to get out of this crisis by feeding our brains endless trails of information that will leave us exhausted at the end of the day. To complement what was said earlier about the power of imagination, when we imagine vivid futures, we use 11 parts of our brain. And when we imagine past scenarios, we use 6 parts of our brain. So we're activating 5 more parts of our brains when we think about what the world looks like vividly in 10 years from now. And that is the type of insight that we need to be tapping into, and that we need to embrace and give ourselves the homework, because it is hard to imagine vividly what the world looks like out of your window 10 years from now. Where are you waking up? Who are you waking up with? What does outside smell like? Like those questions that were asked, we need to answer them.
When you imagine a kind of post-growth world, how do you think we can avoid reproducing the same patterns of inequality we're trying to dismantle at the time?
I think electric cars are the golden child for this explanation, because they're still based on this framework that is extracting a lot of resources, and they're communicated to us to be the climate solution. So they are really greenwashing, a greenwashing package. And I remember when I understood this, I felt lied to, and I felt that we weren't really getting to the root of a lot of our issues. And with mobility is investing in public transportation. So when I think about these new models, these economic models, obviously a lot of us start to talk about things like debt for nature, and we start to talk about things like debt for climate, and a lot of the issues are the insane amount of debt that the Global South has, because they borrowed money from the World Bank 10 years ago, and it's still messing up the country's economies. But when I think about it from a place that I know, because I'm not an economist, that makes sense to me, I realize that the answer is actually a lot of the ways in which, the insights of the ways in which I was raised. I was raised in an indigenous community in central Mexico called the Otomi Toltec Indigenous community. And we have values of good living, buen vivir, of Pachamama. We don't ask ourselves, how do we make our lives and the world better, and how can we get better and better? We ask ourselves, what is good? Because when you're asking what is better, you will always be unsatisfied. But if you tap into asking what is good, you can achieve that. And there will be ups and downs, but you know what a steady line is. And that's what needs to happen with our ecosystems, with our economic models, with our communities. And I imagine a world where we don't talk about saving nature in a way that is only through commodification, through giving value to ecosystems in a way that makes money, but that we can really go beyond that and see the value of a thriving forest because it is. And I think we can get there.
You briefly touched upon debt for climate in your answer. Could you briefly elaborate on what that is, and why do you see that as a part of climate justice?
Debt for Climate is an organization. It's also a way of thinking about how we can swap protecting different ecosystems for debt. So, for example, Colombia could get their debt canceled if they protected X amount of rainforest. And this idea has been going around for quite a while when we're talking about carbon markets and nature. And because now the main conversation in the United Nations is all about the NCQG, which makes no sense to anybody unless you're in the negotiation tracks. It basically means how do we fund climate adaptation, mitigation, and the energy transition. But all of these things that governments are talking about is still loans, which are going to put countries into more debt. So if climate solutions keep costing more and more debt, then they're going to be perpetuating same economic injustices that we see from the World Bank today. So debt for climate is like a transition solution so that we can get to a new economic system that truly puts life and nature at the center. They're really cool. You should check them out. And they are advocating for the cancellation of all of the Global South's debt, which you cannot arrive to a middle ground of a solution if you don't advocate for the, all the way. So that's also another tactic that we employ. Yeah.
I think we could probably sit here for hours and talk about this topic. I have probably another 25 backup questions I would like to ask you. Unfortunately, we're out of time in a minute. If you could ask everyone in this room to take a step towards a more regenerative and inclusive future, what would it be?
I've always, every time I'm asked this question, I wish I had the perfect answer. And the truth is that we might never have the perfect answer for the one thing that you can do. But what occurred to me today was that I would like all of you to make a pledge that lasts 1 year, whatever that is. No new clothes for a year, no airplanes for a year, plant-based diet for a year, whatever it is. Think about what your year pledge can be and share that with your friends and invite them to make a pledge. Even if it's watch a video of a climate activist every week for 1 year, you can get very creative. But I think the most important part of this is you tell your friends about it and you invite them to do it. That's the only way in which we're truly going to get systemic change, especially today where our attentions are always being grabbed by the next thing. So build community around the decisions and the pledges that you take. Thank you.
That was a great call to action.